Imagine yourself looking out at the vast sea before you. You reach down and you put a hand into the water and you scoop it up towards you. Immediately the water starts leaking through your fingers until the hand is empty. That water is a man's life. From birth to death, it is always slipping through our hands until it is gone, along with all that you hold dear in this world.
What's the point anyway? I'm Luke, and I'm here to see how people answer this question. Is our existence pointless, or does it have a meaning? And if so, what is it? Sadly, so many people live their lives on autopilot without even thinking about this question. I have my answer, but this podcast isn't about that. I'm here to bring on a range of interesting guests who have, for one reason or another, gone on a journey to really understand what the point is anyway. So without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm very excited about tonight's guest. It's someone who has been a very influential figure in my life. And when I was crafting the idea for this podcast, he was one of the first people I added to my list of people I intended to interview. Ryan Trainor is a man who can comfortably consider himself one of Australia's most successful entrepreneurs. As an ambitious young entrepreneur myself, I sent him a cold email around 12 years ago after reading his story of selling his education business to a subsidiary of Warren Buffett's Washington Post before he had turned 40. This podcast is titled, What's the Point Anyway? If you asked me back then, Ryan was the answer. He had it all and was truly made. Not only fresh off a big commercial exit, he had an amazing house in one of Melbourne's best streets, a great wife, and 3 beautiful kids. One of those people who had everything going for them, save perhaps a good head of hair. As I've got to know Ryan as a close friend over the past decade, I think we've both realised that worldly success is not the point of it at all. That realisation definitely went into overdrive through the COVID years as we ran 10, 20, 30 kilometres per week together to escape the Melbourne lockdowns. So Ryan, thanks for coming on, and I'm glad we can finally get one of our deep conversations about the meaning of life on record.
Thanks very much, mate. I'm not sure about the hair stuff, mate. I think it's just a lot of testosterone over the years, but all good, mate. I think I've lost it because of those business dealings when I was young, mate. But I'm still hanging on as much as I can.
Well, I've never known you with hair, so...
I did a preemptive strike, actually, mate, when I was 27. I looked at both grandparents and I thought to myself, I've absolutely got no chance. So I'm just going to go and just going to take it short from 27, and I've kept it ever since. So it's by choice, mate. It's by choice.
Perfect. I've been trying to do the same, but Vic's making me hold on. So I'll be with you pretty shortly.
Too good.
All right, so I introduced you according to your business credentials, but I'm far more interested in your life journey and seeking meaning. So to get started, when I say what's the point anyway, what comes to mind?
It's a great question, mate. I probably, over the last couple of years, tried to make a lot more sense of that, funny enough. Mm-hmm. I think, you've been when you're young, you discount time in life a bit because you got so much of it. I think as you're getting older, I've just turned 50, you start to value current time a lot more. So you start kind of thinking about that a lot more as well, and different things happen in your life. But I think I haven't really worked that out yet. I think probably where I'm landing at the moment is I think, life inherently is kind of meaningless. I think it's the meaning that we give it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the divinity of life, isn't it? Is that we get the choice to give it meaning. And I think once you actually realise that you're kind of responsible for that choice, that there is really empowering, where often we kind of think it's in other people's hands. So I feel like for me, it's each day, it's what meaning am I going to give every situation and each choice. And it's seeming to be leading me in the right path, but I'm not sure if that's what the point of it all is, but it's how I'm kind of navigating it at the moment.
What do you think have been the key things that have you know, what have been some key points in your life where the thought around that question has shifted?
Yeah, I think when you're young, I think it's, in life potentially, maybe we overcomplicate it. Often we're here to, as humans or mammals, we're kind of here for survival and to procreate potentially, right? So I think there's all this inbound kind of biological instincts that sit in us. And I think when you're young, you're really trying to define yourself, right? And you're looking around how you're going to make a mark. And, you're probably driven a lot more by ego.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that could even be a survival mechanism as we're trying to find an amazing partner and have kids. And, there's a whole lot of things that maybe sit behind, all of that. So I think sometimes as we're kind of going through those stages, potentially with society as well, we maybe create some false idols around what we actually place and invest importance in. And I think as I've got older, you see how much of it is probably just a social construct that we're giving energy to, and you start pare back the simplicity of what life is, really about. And for me, that's kind of creating moments and memories with people that I love, mainly obviously my family, and friends. And I think, there's a deep something inside of me now, which is a calling, and I think it's trying to listen a lot more to that versus potentially being dragged along what society kind of tells me what's important. And I think that's always a real struggle. It's a
Mm-hmm.
real kind of balance of trying to work that out.
So, like, you know, as I described you in the intro, I'm sure there were there would have been points in your journey that, from an outsider looking in, you had it made. You had all the answers to all the questions. When you spoke about the false idols, was there a point where you believed it, where you thought you had it all worked out? And if not, what were some of the false idols that sort of, you got caught in a snare with?
Yeah, I think life's an unbelievable thing, right? I think it's like as soon as you assign genius and start overreaching, it's got this amazing way of slapping you in the face.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's part of it's like the rhythms of life. It's like that pendulum, right? Like it kind of continues to swing. And I think for me, after I came from very middle class family, and I think that's been part of my identity, which has served me and not served me along the way. Is that I felt like I've really worked hard, as many people have, to kind of got to where I was.
Mm-hmm.
Very much first generation in kind of somewhat of wealth in all of that as well. And you always have these, I guess, aspirations or images of what that actually is like when you haven't got it. And, I think I'd built a lot of ego around identity as, being a young entrepreneur, kind of the underdog, working hard to get somewhere. And I think when I had the exit, with Rach, mind you, as well, it's not just me. I met Rach when I was 20.
Yeah.
So we've been through everything together, which we'll kind of touch on. I mean, the day we sold, I only had like $50 in the bank, and it was a very emotional time and journey. But beyond that, I think it was that, who are you when you're not that young entrepreneur?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that next phase of my life post 40 was actually, I kind of struggled there, and I think I started chasing again because I'd really invested in that identity.
Yeah.
And I didn't kind of think much beyond it. I always considered myself a genuine or low ego person, but, I look back now and maybe I wasn't, right? So I think through the kind of, early 40s to kind of 50 pretty much, I think I was on the false idol was around, my identity and what I kind of invested in all of that. And I think I was chasing a little bit. I was almost like when you're young and you're a bit drunk and you're walking around the bar and you're just a little bit kind of in between consciousness and non-consciousness, I feel like I'd always been someone who somewhat was able to control my environment a little bit, almost mentalism of kind of what my vision was, and trying to kind of almost manifest that, where I felt like I just became an NPC through that time, part of the system, and I was just striving for something which was not really who I was, and started losing my way a little bit.
Yeah. So you were, you obviously had a really successful exit in the sale of, Franklin Scholar to Washington Post. But you never, from the time I've known you, you've never been like an overly flashy guy. Like you had a nice house, but you weren't rolling around a Ferrari or anything like that. It never seemed to me you were, obviously in the commercial world, the things are measured in dollars, but you never seemed totally focused on money. What was it more? Was it ever the money, or was it something else?
Yeah, I definitely. Funny enough, it wasn't the money. I think money's an interesting thing. I think it'd be great to chat around that at some stage, right? Like it's all a construct, right?
Yeah.
Like it's when you really think about what money actually is. But I think for me, it was more around, like identity, like being the entrepreneur, right? I mean, I'm an entrepreneur more because I think it's more like a creative outlet, mate. I feel like what I really love is, and we've been in stuff together, so you kind of would appreciate, is that the camaraderie of, creating a vision and being able to align people behind that vision. And, I think the entrepreneur and vision, and when you're growing these things, it's like we're almost helping each other define who we are to our communities by what we do.
Yeah.
So I feel like, I just love that, leading out the peloton, and you've just got the vision there, and there's this kind of energy where you're getting people all together, and this kind of vibration of creating this business together, and we're on this mission together. So I find that intoxicating. I really do. I think I really love that, and I love people and just human potential, and so that is I miss. But I think for me, it was more along the lines of maybe I had assigned a little bit of genius to what I had done, and I think you start overreaching a little bit in your own capabilities in a few different areas, and you think you can kind of work your way through specific things, and I think that business time for me was not really around chasing money. It was more around defining who I was a little bit, and I think that's evolved a lot, probably mostly over the last 3 to 4 years, to be honest.
Yeah.
Where I'm not just Ryan, the entrepreneur, anymore. I'm a lot more than just that.
Mm-hmm. So how through the business journey where you did have success, but then definitely had a few failures in there as well. What else was going on in your life? Like obviously, 3 girls were born through that time.
Yeah, I think it's I don't know. It was. I think after. I think when I started the next business, and I want to go, we don't have to go too much in the depths of all of that today, because I don't want to bore people with it either. But is that sometimes it's like the reason to why I started the next business, and a lot of it was probably. I'm how close I am with my brother, and being on that journey together, and I feel like maybe when I started, a business is like a marathon, right? You need every single thing going right on the day, and it's a bloody long journey. And I probably started on that next journey like I'd already run 30 Ks, you know what I mean? And I got to start again. And I think what actually happened is, I kind of worry about other people a lot, and I started to internalize a lot through that business, and I actually got really quite sick in that last bit. So I think I'd pushed myself really hard. It wasn't really my calling. I was doing it for the wrong reasons, and then life was giving me little whispers along the way, and I wasn't listening. And then it kind of gave me, a bit of a punch in the face, and I didn't listen. And then one day, it gave me a chair right across the head in my health, where I was forced actually to stop.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe is that the divine kind of telling me, hey, you know what, you're on the wrong path. And I felt like I was on the wrong path. I felt like I was actually swimming against the tide. But I kind of, I had all these, I guess, affirmations growing up, like when the going gets tough, keep pushing yourself. Like these are the times that build us. I don't want to let people down. So I think, one of the things maybe just if people are listening today is that, when you're kind of going into these things as well, you got to be doing it for the right reasons, and that's a very personal thing. But I probably started this next business not for the right reasons, and I feel like I'm here to do other things as well. And it was a really interesting time where my daughter, through that time when she was 2, had cancer, and I remember looking at my diary. This was actually just after I sold my business, and I looked in my diary and think, fucking, like, nothing else matters.
Yeah.
Like I'm pacing all these points, other things. And then fast forward 10 years later, I was with my daughter and I was in a tent, and she actually sat me down and she said, look, Dad, you don't look well. I know you're just doing it, and you look like you're happy and everything, but I'm really scared and sick. And that was kind of end of 2021.
Yeah.
Or 2022, I think. And it kind of sat me back, and it made me question, well, why am I doing it? And it took a 12-year-old, my daughter, into camp to actually probably pull me up a little bit, and then ask me, why am I actually doing all of this? And I think I told myself I'm doing it for my family and my kids and all this stuff, but I wasn't. If I was doing it for my family and my kids, I wouldn't be getting myself sick and doing what I was doing. So it was definitely a wake up call, and I think it was the recession I had to have, mate, to be honest. I think it was defining, and I probably would have continued to go down that path. I feel like I have a little bit of shame because I let some people down by jumping out of that business and kind of resigning as CEO. But I look back now, and it was probably the best thing I could have ever done.
Yeah. So it's a bit of the Walter White and Breaking Bad. I'm doing it for the family.
Yeah, but it was a bit of that, and it was really, when you're deep down into it, well, I want to show up, and like, how am I going to show up every day? And I wasn't showing up the father I thought I was, but the father maybe I should have been, and I've always prided myself on being a good husband and friend, but time was getting stolen and putting into something that I just wasn't in the health to be able to do at that stage. So it wasn't kind of serving anybody. And then you kind of sit back and you go, well, what's the most precious thing have we got in life, right? And it's time, mate. It's like, and everything we do, we're trading time.
Yeah.
Where it's like it's a transaction. So I'm trading time for this, which is I've got definitive amount of time left. Is this the ledger I wanting to be putting that time into at the moment? And I've got young kids and a beautiful wife, and my health is not good. So there's no point if I'm bloody 10 foot under, if I'm not going to serve them right.
Yeah. It's funny you say young kids because, all of a sudden the girls are getting a bit older now. How do you look back at Ryan, the father, over the last 20 years? Or probably, less than 18 years, is it?
Wait, yesterday was Father's Day here in Australia. And I do feel like the biggest thing for kids is, for me as a father, was to make sure that, I'm investing time, and the equity, which is time, which is my equity in the bank for them. And, I coach and do everything. But I think at times, I think we all could fall into this trap, is just the difference of time and being present is sometimes, having things whirling around in your mind. And I think I could have been more present at times. And I feel like now, I'm really valuing time with them, like, because my eldest is 18, I've got 16 and 14. And I just know that time and space is really moving so quickly at the moment. I'm going to look back on this time, and I'm actually clinging on for dear life at the moment. Like I'm really, I really think about it a lot, and yeah. So I wouldn't do anything differently, but I think what I would do is you don't value that time as much. And now that you don't have it and you look at those photos when they were younger, you're going, why did I fucking stress about that? Or, I was worrying about things that I just didn't need to worry about. Whereas I think, I'd be a lot more present and around it if I had my time again.
Yeah. So you mentioned Nella getting cancer when she was 2, so that was 12 years ago.
Yeah.
How much did that shift your worldview at that point in time?
Well, it did everything, mate. It was really interesting. It was my Nella had been diagnosed with a Wilms tumor, which was 10 centimeters by 5 centimeters in a 2-year-old. And I remember I got a message. I was flying back from Queensland, actually seeing Link and my nephew Kyle, and she said, "Look, just when you land, just give us a buzz." And Rach had been together for so long, I just thought, oh God, someone knew something was up. So I met Rach at the Royal Children's, and I saw the oncology up on the on the banner as you're walking through, and I thought, Jesus, like that's something I read about in other people, not our family, and it was just like. Yeah, it was really, really challenging time, but one again, which Rach and I we put our head down, and I think Nella is the person she is today, even though she doesn't know it, but she's really values life. Like it's really interesting watching her. I think there's something in all of that. So I think at that stage I said to myself, like, how lucky and grateful I was. But then again, 10 years later,
back to it.
I was, saying that, through that time we have lived, like we've had a fantastic, like I am so grateful. So anyone who's listening today is like, there's definitely no poor me in all of it. It is a journey, and everyone's, their experiment of one in life as we go through it. But yeah, it really did. And at the same time, Dad passed away at the same time as well. And it was a pretty challenging kind of time there for a little bit. And you start almost you're feeling a bit more vulnerable in life, right? Before that, you're 10 foot tall and bulletproof. And then you start to question a few things about life. And yeah, it just doesn't the ground shifts under you just a little bit.
Yeah. Was it the most significant thing that has happened in your life to date, Nella getting sick? Because obviously, I've got 3 kids now as well, similar ages perhaps to what they were then. I still can't imagine how I would deal with a situation like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we're the lucky ones, mate. And I think, you almost as a parent, you amnese a lot of that feeling in it. But I think, Rach and I, again, met Rach when I was 20. So that's at nearly 31 years we've been together now. I think it was something that really defined us, and because of that, we went and lived in Bali for 2 years, put the kids into green school. We've lived because of it, and I think part of it is, what do you take from it? Like, what's the lesson, in all of it? And sometimes we can I feel like I can dwell on that, but the lesson and what we got out of that experience as well. Because we are fortunate, mate. I mean, you're probably going to interview people on the podcast that weren't so lucky, and they'll have different, but, out of it is we changed our life a lot. And we probably had experiences and lived, probably more than others because of it as well. So I think the net gain on our family from a perspective would, we look back we don't look back actually as this horrible experience. We look at back as we all chipped in as a family, our friends rallied around us, and then we made the most of our life since that. And it just happens to be, though, that I fell back into the well a little bit with work and identity and what I wanted to do. But other than that, mate, it's been a good life to date.
Yeah. So I I mean, I must have first known you maybe a year or so after the experience with Nala. So I can't really comment on Ryan pre that experience to after, but I have watched you, particularly over the last sort of 4 years, experiencing the burnout that you mentioned before, and maybe if we can dig into that a little bit more, because it seems to me like there's been a really sort of profound change in your outlook and who you are as a person from that. Like I would be surprised if in 10 years' time you're back to doing what you were doing 5 years ago. Talk a little bit about that journey of burnout and health, and like what was going through your brain at that point.
Yeah, I think it was just I'd pushed myself for a long period of time. Like, everyone's got challenges, right? But, since I was early 20s, I've been an entrepreneur, and, you need to, we talk about balance in life, right? But the reality is that to be able to achieve extraordinary things or extraordinary things, you need to do extraordinary things, right? It's cause and effect
without balance.
Without balance.
Yeah.
And so the reality is that you need counterbalance in life at certain stages. But if you get to a stage where it's like a farm, and if you're kind of just harvesting all year, every year, the soil starts to kind of get a bit manky, right? You need to, reseed and, clean the tools, and you just need to sometimes, just do the maintenance. And I feel like when you're pushing yourself for so hard for so long, there's a lot of stress that comes with it. And again, stress is, if everything's meaningless, just the meaning that you give it, you're associating stress with that. It's a choice at that certain stage. But if you do choose to see it that way, your nervous system can get quite unregulated. Disease is dis-ease pretty much within your body. Inflammation gets created, and your body starts to break down. And then so then for that whole moment for me was, it's been nearly 2 years since that time, and it was really just kind of doing the work, mate. It's kind of again, just like, how did I get myself there? Number one. And then you just sit back, and I've been, I'm not preaching any of this stuff, but I read a lot now. I meditate. And my whole idea around my practice around meditation's completely shifted. And I look at life in a different way. Like I'm amused by life a little bit now. Like I look at the social constructs or these social agreements that we've all kind of agreed upon, the false idols that we kind of pray to in life, and just the ridiculousness of it. And I've kind of become a little bit skeptical, to be honest, around, but still in awe of it. But just how the meaning that we've created and what society looks like at the moment. So I just become a bit more less of a consumer of, information, and more of to sit back and analyze it and with critical thought around, why we do what we do, what does that actually mean? And even my own beliefs, mate, to be really honest, like, if I say something to 10 people in a room, the same thing, each person will interpret that differently, right? So you realize that our life is really rendered through our own thoughts. And then you sit back, and I've been kind of observing, well, how much of the thoughts are mine versus have just been implanted in me through beliefs, education, the news, information that I've been digesting. So how much of life as I see it is my reality versus others? So then you start burning down your own belief system, and so it's a journey, right? And then you start seeing the world in a lot different way. And so I feel like at the moment I'm kind of in the midst of reconstructing what my views are, from even religiously through to life, through how I engage in the world, the choices of meaning that I give to everything. So it's a really fascinating time, I think, and I just, it's like I open up the paper and just laugh at it now, or I listen to something and just thought, it's just, so the other problem is just trying to ensure that I'm not overly skeptical of everything. But I think that's the wonder of it all now, is that it's you start kind of sitting back and seeing for what it is, and it's how you wish to engage with it now, rather than it engaging you.
Yeah. So what would you say has been the biggest change in belief over the last 5 years?
Just probably just stepping back and looking at society. We've kind of almost, like, I look at it, like we've hit peak abundance,
Yeah.
almost at the moment. And, when you hit abundance, I think as a society, we're talking probably Western civilization, right? The Western country, is that you start manufacturing friction, because, like, biologically, I think we're hunters and gatherers, and we kind of need that in our life. So we're starting to create so many issues that if people were hungry, they wouldn't be issues, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's so much abundance. So yeah, I think we're creating this artificial friction, which then creates this division. And then I'm just really interested in watching people at the moment around just this lack of public discourse around important things, right? Like, we've almost hit this nexus where people are just scared to talk or have conversations and share ideas, and and I feel like that's where we're just lacking in life. So I guess I'm like a spectator now, going, well, how am I supposed to appreciate someone else's opinion or view if they don't share it anymore, because everyone's fearful of being othered or judged, or there's a label for it all? So I feel like we're at this really interesting kind of moment in time where we're almost, we're still, as a society, we're kind of hitting this point, which I think is going to be really interesting over the last 3 or 4 years. So I guess a very long answer to a short question, but I think I'm just really, really interested in, take a lot more interest in just society now, and just as an observer, and how I want to participate that. Like, how do I want to show up in all of it? And I guess my values and how I see the world has shifted ridiculously over the last 3 or 4 years by just questioning a lot more of what I thought was true and what's not.
Yeah. Would have you described yourself as a skeptic through, the 2010s, or were you fairly, like, did you always sort of believe what you read, or have you always been a little bit skeptical?
I think like, I prided myself on trying to be like an independent thinker.
Yeah.
But I think where I have been, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's environmental, mate, or if it's just we're born, or whatever way it is, but I can spend the next 2 hours talking about the where my weaknesses are. But generally, it's from a young age, been able to be more lateral around thought. Like structure and rules, I've always seen them as constructs and questioned them. So I think that's probably why I've been able to be somewhat successful as an entrepreneur, is that I don't see the linear. I actually do. I don't see the lines at times, right? But then saying that, then if we're all in a simulation and we're downloading all the information around how we're interpreting the world, I probably took a lot of what I read as kind of, I just took it on face value. So I feel like I kind of sat in between it all. I think the challenge though now is with skepticism is that it's really working through what's the essential few rather than the important many, like what matters to me and what am I going to invest my time in. So generally, again, like the polarity or the duality of feeling is like, I'm not getting outraged by what I see, because that's just a feeling and just a choice I'm going to associate with that. I'm probably just looking at it now and going, all right, well, how do I want to engage with that now? Or, if I don't believe in that, then what does that mean for me and my family? Or so it's probably, yeah, I'm not outraged and into the point of being a skeptical old man sitting and rocking in my chair. Just a little bit now sifting through, okay, well, what does that all mean? And still trying to work it all out.
Yeah. Do you think, because I think we've both sort of gone on a similar journey with these things over the past 4 years, and we've probably responded to it a little bit differently. I've sort of, not opted out. I've continued to live my life and do my thing, but in many things I've just sort of opted out of. Do you think for you, has it been easier or harder being someone that probably came into the last 5 years with influence, with a position in society, with a reputation? Because no one really knew me before it, so I could just sort of sift off and do my own thing. Whereas for you, it's maybe a bit different.
Yeah, sure. I think the reality is that we are, what anyone's beliefs are, we're still kind of experiencing this life, right? And I think it's more along the lines of, it's how you want to engage in that life. And I kind of look at things as pretty basic. Like sometimes we're always trying to create meaning in everything, right? You know what I mean? And we're trying to join dots and, but sometimes it's like,
hence the podcast name. What's the point, hey?
Yeah. And I think we're all working that out. I think that is the point of life, right? And so I think, but then it comes back to some really basic stuff. I think is like, like each day for me, like I'm trying to think around, like just trying to create like a net value in other people's life. Like if everyone just did that, like you could say, what's karma, right? And karma could be any way you want to look at it. But generally, if you're kind of creating a greater energy and vibration around life, that's just a positive thing. So if I'm kind of a net value to more people each day, then there's probably a higher likely chance that, not that you're doing it for any expectation, that there's something back, like someone will kind of give you that energy back, right? So I think like we've kind of lost our way a little bit at the moment. And I think, the way I'm kind of looking at it is actually trying to make it a lot more simpler. Is that, what are my core values, and what's, and I think that is the biggest thing it's taken away from me, is like, for me over these last few years, is that what are my core values and virtues, right? Because that there is the compass for everything I do now. Mm-hmm. And this is going to sound a little bit controversial, but even if that means it is encroaching on laws, but my values and virtues are that strong, then I will follow that now. And that takes a lot of work, and that could be taken a lot by a lot of people, right? But I think we what I've kind of taken now is that, my personal responsibility of how I show up and how I want to participate and engage, and part of that is I've actually kind of tried to strip life back to some real basics that kind of surround that.
Yeah.
That's a bit of a waffle, but I don't know if that kind of makes sense.
No, definitely. It made me think I just had to look it up, the Thomas Jefferson quote, when tyranny becomes law, rebellion becomes duty.
Yeah, it's interesting. I do sometimes look at things and, like, it's like around censorship and things like that at the moment. Like, as soon as we have an arbitrator of who's the truth, regardless if you trust them or not, it's a very, very slippery slope, right? And I think that's the way society is kind of moving more now, isn't it? It's kind of moving more towards, lack of public discourse and discussion. And I mean, how many conversations can you really have that you think about, mate, out there with people, right? Like, people will judge and label people now. Whereas I was reading the other day around almost like a philosophy of constructivism, right? Whereas, we and I kind of subscribe to this, is that I have a belief or a view at this point in time. And then if we then talk and you then share your view, then my view might change based on the information and that transaction of conversation.
Yeah.
But at the moment, it will just continue to be polarized, won't it?
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
exactly.
Like it's these echo chambers that are being created. So I think for me, I've got a real calling now, I think, around trying to have and create more environments where you can have those honest conversations. Because if we don't, I think that's probably where I want to lean in a lot more. And I think that's probably what I've taken over the last few years is I might have been a lot more quiet
Yeah.
around specific things, but it's like, okay, no, well, am I creating a net value? So am I to other people? So I'm not doing anyone harm in society or doing the right thing, and if it's part of my values and virtues and it really sits within me, then I need to probably speak more around those things just as part of the discourse, because it's not right or wrong, because there's the dualities of where that sits.
Yeah.
But I think it needs to be more discussed.
Well, I think as RFK said recently, and I mean I've got mixed views on RFK. I think I agree with him on some things and disagree on others, which is basically the assessment you should have of pretty much all people. You don't agree with everything they say, but the point he's made is that the sort of centerpiece of the American Constitution and the idea of a democracy and a country that's run sort of by the people for the people is that you have an open furnace of ideas, and the worst ideas can get thrown into that, and through discourse and debate the correct answer rises to the top. But as soon as you start putting a limit on what ideas can be discussed or can't be discussed, it's sort of the beginning of the end.
So true, mate. But also, if you don't have if there isn't, on the scale of the polarities, different views, if there's no white, there's no black. Like if there's no good, there's no bad. If there's no hot, there's no cold. Like it's you can't. It's very hard to have views, and if it's not, but at the moment, it's all views are almost frowned upon. Like even mate, if you think about discourse with your kids, dinners at home. Right, like everyone's listening at the moment, like how many people eat dinner with their family anymore? Like who knows their neighbours? Like, when was, the last time, you had a healthy debate at a dinner party? Like they're the things which it's almost we've lost a lot of that. Do you know what I mean? And we're now on an algorithm based on the social media. Like the other day I was with my daughter, and I looked around at this cafe, and I honestly 90% of them would be on their phones.
Yeah.
And I felt sick, and actually my daughter said to me, I feel sick as well. And then at the end of the day, if we go back to the start of our conversation, mate, and it's like, if our reality is based on, I guess, how we render life and through our thoughts, the algorithms that we're getting through social and what we listen to, is how they're rendering their experience, right? And you even think about schools. I mean, what are schools teaching kids these days? If you don't have a dinner at home and actually discuss the values of your family, or even just the opposing kind of perspectives, then we're actually kind of creating very much a kind of generation of one speed thinkers. You know what I mean? They're not rewarded for critical thinking. So it feels like even as a parent these days, mate, like what are we doing? Not because we're not right either. Like we're just an opinion. Don't take our words for it. But how do you impart that in this next generation coming through? It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, having kids that are 4, 2, and 0 at the moment, starting to think about what school looks like is a really, really scary thought at the moment. I'm sort of hoping for a bit of a pendulum shift back by the time they get a little bit older, but at the same time, maybe I'm going to have to be. There is an element of not sitting back and waiting. Waiting for. We need to be the change and create the change. So if we want a pendulum shift, and I want to raise the kids, maybe I need to be more involved in speaking to the schools and suggesting things and having some debate. I mean, imagine that debate among parents about what goes into the curriculum.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you can't sit outside the system either, right? Like we can't
No.
move to the hills and then, in the sense that it's like, how do you, like you think about what thinking really is, and it's, like for kids, it's like, how do we create an operating system? Like it's like a phone, right? It's like an operating system where, it's how we, that's kind of sitting in the background and how we kind of, work through thoughts and processes. Like I think our job is to try and download the operating system and then so how they interpret information. Whereas at the moment, like it's kind of like they just download the information and it just sits on the mainframe and then that's the truth, right? Well, no, that's just kind of part of what it is. So I think we can't shelter, but what we can probably do is kind of create some structure and filters on how they render, or just at least get them to ask questions and be inquisitive and be curious. Like, fuck, mate, how many people aren't curious these days? Like, that's the other thing. Like, like we just accepting what we're being told and just being consumers of information. So, I don't know. I think, I feel like we've got a reasonable balance with our kids. And you don't want to also be putting fear into them or creating boogeymen or these types of things. But, like even when we had lockdowns here in Melbourne, which was crazy, I still had 2 screens up and I said to the girls, here's one with a camera, handy cam walking through the crowd. And then here's the news, right? Now, I'm not casting opinions, but you need to always see that there's 2 perspectives. There's the duality of everything, and then you've got to form your own opinion, right? But don't just take one perspective without having a look at the other.
So you've been, all the time I've known you, I think in a really good way, like fiercely protective of your reputation, more so in a way of just you're always considered with how you do things and you're protective of a really strong reputation that you've built. As we talk about sort of the world now and some of these challenges with sort of censorships and lack of ability to have discourse, how do you, so you can get cancelled for anything, how do you feel now about, like, do you care what people think about you, or are you caring less?
It's a great question, mate. I think I'd be lying to say, I think that the challenge also, we know when you're talking it before around the journey, I think part of it's identity, and I think what identity is also relevance, and I feel like I've had to really struggle with that in a way where you say you just want to go off and go into obscurity and that, but maybe it's a social hierarchy or relevance. It's a really interesting thing, and I don't know if it's just a survival mechanism or is it ego or whatever it is. So I think, maybe it goes back to the tribal days, is you don't want to be kicked away from the tribe sometimes, right? So by having, all these opposing views. So I think where maybe I'm more moving to is that, I don't want to also become an echo chamber, or even being completely wedded to my own views, because again, they're just, it's only a point in time. So I feel like maybe, the opportunity is to be able to create safe places where various views are being heard, right? So I feel like my role is not necessarily adding and screaming like we're all at a nightclub screaming at the top of our voice and no one can really hear. I think the opportunity more is how do you create spaces for discourse? Because if I just go down my views of different things, a lot of people will agree with me who already got those views.
Yeah, preaching
that's
to the
not
choir.
That's not there lies the challenge. Like even just most influencers in their specific areas, so I feel like the other opportunity is how do you introduce perspectives that allow people to look at it from different angles to people who may not have had that views. And I don't know if I've got the answer to that. I'm going to be trying to do that with my podcast, but I feel like, and you're trying to do it with yours, but I think there lies the opportunity, right? Is like, how does just everyday people, how do you actually create conversations at a dinner party where people aren't going to be outraged, but they can exchange ideas without fear of judgment or being outcasted? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's the goal, and I'm trying to work my way through that, mate.
Yeah. If you don't mind, we might shift a little bit now. I'd love to, as I said to you when we spoke about getting you on as the next guest. I've sort of had the first two guests were both Christian, and you're not Christian, which is totally fine. That was always the intention for me, was to bring people with different sort of worldviews and different religious views. I know you've sort of gone on a bit of a journey over the last 5 years and probably believe totally different things now to what you did. Maybe as a starting point, and then we'll get into it a bit more. Could I just do a quick Q&A with you? I'll say, let's say 2018, 2019 Ryan, and then 2024 Ryan. Just give me sort of a one sentence answer, what comes to mind for each. So if I say 2018 Ryan, is there such thing as God?
No, I probably would have called myself an atheist in 2018.
Yeah. 2024 Ryan?
Open-minded.
Yeah. Is there an unseen realm? 2018 Ryan?
Maybe deep down, kind of felt an inkling.
Yeah.
But it was deep down.
And 2024 Ryan?
Yeah, absolutely.
What happens when we die? 2018 Ryan?
Hadn't really thought about it. wasn't on my mind.
2024 Ryan, 6 years older.
Yeah, again, this is only a point in time. So this I don't know if this is going to age very well, mate. But I think there's a continuum, in my view, in all of it, is where I'm starting to get starting to land at the moment.
Yeah. So do you want to go into a little bit where you're landing? What's your perspective on what the bigger story is, or what the bigger picture of this crazy world that we live in?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, I've always known there's something more, right? And I think sometimes we get hung up on definitions, like, God, and, it's been ages, or for the ages it's been debated, So I feel like I'm, at the moment, not as learned as you are and others, but I'm deeply curious. So I read a lot, right? And I'm reading everything at the moment. And I feel like from the Rosicrucians through to the Hermeticism, through to, parts of the Bible, through to, you name it, I'm reading it through. And what I do like is that there's themes, right? And there's threads. And there's a consistency regardless of some principles and philosophies. And then, so I'm kind of at the moment, I guess, at the smorgasbord, and I'm just tasting a lot of different things there at the moment, and kind of starting to form my views without judgment and without being rushed in all of it as well. But what I can say is that, even my meditation's shifted, right? Like, I used to be thinking it's more of a physical quiet my mind, where now I've read some of the most creative people in history, right? And they all talk about inspiration doesn't come from them, it comes through them, right? And I find that really, really interesting. And, so when I'm quieting my mind, some people might call it prayer, some people might call it meditation, whatever it is, I feel like I'm somewhat in my own kind of start of my own journey, tapping into something greater than myself, and call it a collective consciousness or whatever. And I'm, rather than stilling my mind, I'm listening a lot more. And I feel like that there has been profound for me. And and that listening has it leads me to really interesting views and concepts, and how I'm starting to create my own kind of framework around things.
Mm-hmm. What's been some of the most interesting stuff you've read?
I mean, at the moment, I've I'm actually deep into Egyptian. I'm deep into the Hermeticism at the moment,
Mm-hmm.
and probably what really resonates with me is just the principles, the 7 principles around, and then the threads in regards to all of that. And so I'll just go, super deep for maybe 3 months into that. Um, I've actually, which is a little bit off tangent, but I'm happy to share it, is that, and again, it's something that maybe you and I kind of maybe have slightly differing views, but what's been interesting for me is even through psychedelics as well, is this, it's kind of found me, I kind of look at it now, and I never did any drugs growing up. It was really weird. Like I was reasonable athlete,
Yeah.
pretty focused on business. Yeah, probably drank too much along the way, but never really got into that for whatever reason. So for me, going and researching it for 2 or 3 years, I feel like it's been almost put on this earth for me is a way to actually help us reconnect when we just become so materialist in us as single entities. It kind of maybe just it's not the answer, and it's only just I think it's just a support mechanism that you have to do all the work yourself with, but it just kind of helps break down back into different realms of being part of something more, and just gives you that little help along the way. And it's been really, really profound for me. And it's made me kind of think about life a little bit differently and how we construct it, as above, so below type of thing. So I feel like, even just the way I think about things dimensionally, even went back and started researching the Mayans, mate, and went deep into that for a while. So I think there's so much history that's come for so many years, but as humans now, we just discount all of that like it's just mythical humbo jumbo. But it's been, it's just fascinating. And if you don't pay attention to it, or you don't research or discount it out of hand, even if you just take basic principles and philosophies out of it, I think you're going to be a better human being, right? So, a lot of the people listening to yours will be Christians or a lot more learned than I am. I'm very much on my journey, but I'm starting to form views. And if you interview me in 2 years, mate, it'll be probably completely different as well. So I think that's the beauty of it all.
Well, I think that's the best answer. I think we get ourselves really stuck when we get fixed on a position. And that goes, I mean, you won't see a bigger example of that than within Christianity. Like there's 850,000 words in the Bible. It's the most complex book ever written, really, which is layers and layers and layers. And most Christians will believe the same thing about it that they believed 20 years ago. So whereas I try to be so open-minded with it, just keep learning and seeing what is this saying here, what's this saying here, and I'm the same as you. I think the ancient world is fascinating. And there's some really interesting parallels, and you see this journey of how, the Hebrews and the Egyptians obviously crossed paths famously, and the Babylonians and the Assyrians and into the Greeks and the Stoics and the Romans. The period of time from 2000 BC to 500 AD. There's so much happening in there, and we just sit in our little echo chamber in 2024 in cafes staring down at our
TikTok
black screen doing TikTok, and I can't help but think the idea of progress might have turned into sort of deprogress more than anything.
I think part of it's also, I don't want to be too cynical, but it purposely distracts people.
Yeah.
From maybe what the meaning is, and it's if maybe we all really tapped into what that was, maybe it would be a lot more powerful than we are. I mean, there's been some amazing people, as you said, over the years. Like I've just finished Down the Rabbit Hole with Carl Jung, right? Interesting people have done a lot of exploration. I think part of it is the rite of passage really is around doing the work and doing that discovery and being curious and that journey itself is never ending, mate. I think, for me, and as long as we're curious, keep continuing to be curious and open-minded to it, but definitely feel like there's something more. And I just believe in consciousness, the collective consciousness. And I do feel like almost now when I'm meditating, be it right or wrong, it's almost like I am not just downloading, but syncing, and if you actually sit and listen, when you're those quiet moments and things come through you, it's fascinating, right? Like, and then even just paying more attention in your day, like after, just like watching why things happen, and it's not like you're trying to create meaning all the time and joining the dots, but it feels like for me personally, my experience is often the universe kind of speaks through things to you at different moments. But how many times now we're just not listening? We just, so I feel like that there is, even if that's not true, it's a fucking great way to live. Like it's like you're paying attention. Like when someone sit next to me, I'm paying more attention now, right? Like that's again, that net value. But generally something will happen. You go, shit, like you said that exactly the right time, or I've just caught up with you and you've just suggested this book, or, like I was there for someone at their time of need. Now, and even if that's wrong and it's off par, it's just a great way to live.
Yeah.
So I feel like just being more tapped in and intentional around your days. And I feel like it's just, if we all did that, I'd just be a lot better, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's funny, when we think about sort of the spirit world and the spiritual realm and different ideas and different people tapping into it. This modern idea of atheism is very weird when you compare it to the rest of history. Like all of history, there's certainly been different beliefs, but pretty much all groups believed there was something. They just had different interpretations of what that something was or how you could connect with it. And psychedelics have been a way through the ages that people have tapped into it. So I wouldn't mind actually.
It's like rituals. Like if you think of how many ancient times, and you could probably go through some of the scriptures and religions, mate, where there has been the use of it, or alluded to the use of it in different situations. But sometimes people think they become evangelistic, like it's the answer, and they've seen God through. But it's just I feel like it's, for me, I kind of, in my day-to-day, I might see the world in 1D.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because generally it might be even like, it's almost like our life is humans, maybe is like we are seeing it through a lens, through procreation, survival. So there could be so much more happening around us dimensionally, but we don't see it. Like we're only seeing the world in a specific way. And I feel like, from my personal experience, is that you almost see that, it's got this unbelievable way of giving you lessons, but then you feel like you're part of more, and you do start to see various dimensions beyond what we have here. So what it really did for me was more spark my curiosity to seek more answers and research more than thinking that it gave me any answers. So it's really sparked my curiosity more, but also I look back and I just go, everything's just a construct, mate. Like every laws, rules,
money,
money. It's a social agreement. So when it even helped me see that more, right? Yeah. It's even helped me think and be a better, I think, even in business, to be really honest. So it's like when you just see it's all just made up, it's all just a construct. Then you go, well, okay, when you need to ask more, you just start asking more and more deeper questions.
Yeah. Can you articulate what the experience is actually like?
It's really weird because I think when people start trying to delve into that, people listening and go, fucking, what's going on here?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
like, I mean, so, I mean, I think for me, really, it is, you know, I'm kind of, it's very clear intention. But, you know, it was really interesting. The lessons that I've had along the way was, you know, I confronted every single insecurity that I've ever had, you know, in my life. And I saw that materialize in different people. So it kind of really showed me around my relationships is nothing to do with anybody else in my life. It's the emotion and meaning I give through the experiences I've had, and I'm just projecting onto others through to, you know, literally feeling like I've gone into different dimensions and time and space has shifted from future, past, now being all the same. So even my relationship with time and space has shifted, and, you know, my sense of that through to, you know, being able to experience and see different things which I'm still trying to interpret. And it's vivid. It's just like us having a conversation now. What I'm really fascinated in at the moment, mate, is dreams. Like every night I go to bed super excited
Yeah,
because
right.
it feels like I'm like it could be the night shift and this is the day shift. Who knows? You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like where are we when we're dreaming? And, you know, like, so it's kind of to open my mind. I could speak hours and hours on it, but also of, you know, of now getting involved more from a with one of the universities in the commercialization for people with post-stress disorder and anxiety, and the clinical studies coming out, mate, is just, it is unbelievable, right? And again, it's not for everybody. It needs to be appropriate. But, you know, here we are drinking alcohol or taking SSRIs or taking things that pharmaceutical companies will give us, yet we've planted the fear, again, the reality that we've created in society is that these are bad. Like, who said that, by the way? Like, you know, you go back through the ages of the 50s and 60s, the war on drugs. Why did people do it? Vietnam War. Like, there's a whole range of different things. It could be other situations sitting behind all of this. But again, we've downloaded in society that these are there and they are not good for us. And I'm not saying that everyone should take them, but, you know, something in a petri dish in a pharmaceutical company created by Pfizer may not necessarily be the answer either, right? Just being, you know, super skeptical here.
I might have to be careful where we publish this. I might get cancelled. I might get cancelled for a comment like that.
I don't know, me too.
Well, mate, it's been great chatting. I'd love to maybe end on one final question that might sort of tie it all together. What was your life goal 10 years ago? What is it now? And what do you think it'll be in 10 years?
I think 10 years ago, being really honest, would have been a lot more, and I think stage of life around the more material things, right? Like, but part of it, I think sometimes, mate, we fall into the trap of feeling that's bad all the time. Like, part of it is, yeah, I want to be able to create a house for my family and my kids. That's not bad. You know, yeah, I do want to have, like, what's money? Like, it gives me the freedom to choose to do specific things that I want to do. Like, that could be going and taking 2 days off to go on a road trip with my daughter through to, you know, going and seeing the pyramids. You know what I mean? So I feel like often, again, we trying to associate. So, but I do believe it would probably be more materialistic. I think now in this part of life is really, for me, digging deeper into what's it all for.
Yeah.
He's like, it's really like, what is my calling? And I there's something in me, mate, and this probably is, we probably are just, maybe we're just one and done, who knows? But I feel like there's something in me, and I'm just listening to that. I feel like there's stuff I still want to be able to do. So I think at the moment, what I'm really excited about is, you know, what meaning am I going to give the meaningless over this next 10 years, you know, and what does that actually look like? And then I think for me, you know, in 10 years' time is that, you know, I want to have felt that I've been able to not look back, and I don't think I will, with just any regrets. that like I've kind of lived the kind of values in alignment the way I wanted to do it. And I've got beautiful grandchildren, hopefully, around me. And I've been able to create a net positive for the people that I kind of love around me. And I think it becomes that simple for me. Like I just, like that's what it's all about for me now. I mean, there is a personal side of trying to work out how I can kind of contribute more. But generally for me, it's 10 years time is I've kind of done the things I wanted to do. And I've got the people around me are healthy, and I'm just living a simple life and just around people that I love and I guess love me, mate.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Well, I hope you get there. I've we've known each other 12 years ago now, and as I said at the start, it's been probably the last 3 or 4 that it's like Ryan, the guy that's trying to work out life, is far more interesting to me now than, I'm glad we didn't talk about what business ventures you're up to or what business ventures you're doing next, because I think that starts to roll into just the meaningless. But I've really enjoyed fleshing it out, and I'm interested to see in 10 years' time what you derive the purpose of things and what your answer to what's the point of it all is anyway.
But mate, I want to say thank you to you as well, mate. I mean, I think us through the lockdown and going for runs and having like another male as well in your life that you can just have these open and honest discussions with, and even the way that we've spoken over the time, even when we've having various different views at specific stages, your ability to be able to be, I don't know, you don't force your views down people's throats. You're very open-minded, and Mike, I really value you as a mate. So it's just so great that we kind of got into business together all those years ago, and then still remain great mates through it. And as we kind of still ponder, I can see us probably on a rocking chair, maybe in those 10, 15 years time, still kind of chatting around these types of things too.
Yelling at the wind.
Yelling at the wind. Exactly right, mate. So thank you as well, buddy. I really appreciate it.